I remember standing in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting my simple white wedding dress for the 100th time. My hands were shaking not from nervousness about marrying Jake, but from the growing realization that my parents really were not going to show up. Outside the bridal suite window, I could see guests arriving cars pulling into the parking lot of our small venue. But there was no sign of the familiar blue sedan that should have carried the two people who brought me into this world. Before I tell you this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real stories from everyday life. And now, let me take you back to the most important day of my life, the day I learned what real love looks like, and that it does not always come from the family you are born into. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio, I always knew I was living in my younger sister Madison's shadow. My dad worked as an accountant for a local firm, and my mom was a registered nurse at the county hospital. They were good people, hard-working people, but they had this way of making everything about Madison that left me feeling invisible most of the time. Madison was 2 years younger than me, but from the time she could walk and talk, she was clearly the star of our family. She had these gorgeous blonde curls that caught the light just right, bright green eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and this natural charm that made everyone around her feel like they were the most important person in the room. I was the brunette older sister with average grades, average looks, and what felt like an average everything. I remember when we were kids, maybe I was 10 and Madison was 8, our neighbors, the Johnsons, came over for a backyard barbecue. My parents spent the entire evening bragging about Madison's performance in the school talent show, how she had sung a solo and gotten a standing ovation from the entire auditorium. They talked about her perfect report card, her acceptance into the gifted program, and how her teacher said she was the most naturally intelligent student she had ever encountered. When Mrs. Johnson politely asked about me, my mom just smiled and said something like, "Oh, Chloe is doing fine too. She's a good helper around the house." That was it. I was a good helper. Not smart, not talented, not special, just helpful. The favoritism was not just in words. Madison got the bigger bedroom with the bay window and built-in bookshelf. I got the smaller room at the back of the house that barely fit a twin bed and a dresser. When it came time for extracurricular activities, Madison got piano lessons, ballet classes, and tennis at the country club. I was allowed to pick one activity because of budget constraints, even though somehow they always found money for Madison's needs. By the time we reached high school, the pattern was set in stone. Madison was the homecoming queen, the valedictorian, the girl who dated the quarterback, and had colleges fighting over her with scholarship offers. I was the quiet art kid who spent lunch periods in the library and whose biggest achievement was getting my design featured in the school yearbook. When graduation came around, Madison received a full ride to Northwestern University for international business. The celebration party my parents threw for her filled our entire backyard with relatives, neighbors, and family friends. There was a banner catered food, and my dad gave this emotional speech about how proud they were of their exceptional daughter, who was destined for greatness. My graduation from the same high school 2 years earlier had been marked by a dinner at Applebee's, with just the four of us, and even then, most of the conversation centered around Madison's upcoming junior year achievements. I ended up at Ohio State studying graphic design, paying my own way with student loans and a part-time job at a local print shop. It was not glamorous, but I loved the creative work, loved seeing ideas come to life through visual design. My parents visited campus exactly once in 4 years, and that was only because they were already driving through Columbus to drop Madison off for a summer internship at a prestigious consulting firm. Madison, meanwhile, was living it up at Northwestern. She joined the best sorority, studied abroad in London and Hong Kong, and dated a series of impressive men who all seemed to have trust funds and summer homes. Her Instagram was a constant stream of fancy dinners, weekend trips to Chicago, and internships with Fortune 500 companies. When I graduated with my degree in graphic design, I moved to Denver to start fresh. I found work at a small but creative design studio that specialized in branding for local businesses. The pay was not amazing, but I was finally doing work that felt meaningful, creating visual identities that helped small business owners share their dreams with the world. It was at my favorite coffee shop near the studio that I met Jake. He was sitting at a corner table with his laptop, wearing a faded Colorado Rockies t-shirt and jeans with a small hole in the knee. He had brown hair that was slightly messy, like he had been running his hands through it while concentrating, and when he looked up from his screen to order another coffee, I noticed he had these kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I was not planning to talk to anyone that day. I had just finished a particularly challenging project and was treating myself to an expensive latte and a good book. But when Jake's laptop battery died and he looked around helplessly for an outlet, I pointed to the one near my table and offered to share the space. We ended up talking for 3 hours. Jake was a software engineer who had moved to Denver from Michigan for work. He was genuine in a way I was not used to from the men I had dated before. He did not try to impress me with stories about his job or his car or his workout routine. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about my design work and actually listened to my answers. He told me about his love for hiking and his dream of building his own house someday, complete with a workshop where he could build furniture as a hobby. There was something incredibly refreshing about being with someone who was not trying to be anything other than exactly who he was. Jake was not the most handsome man I had ever met, and he definitely was not the wealthiest. But when he walked me to my car that evening, I felt more seen and appreciated than I had in years. We started dating slowly. Jake would pick me up for weekend hikes in the mountains, and we would spend hours talking about everything and nothing, while surrounded by Colorado's incredible scenery. He introduced me to his coworkers who welcomed me warmly into their group. We went to baseball games and art galleries and small concerts at local venues. After 18 months of the most genuine, supportive relationship I had ever experienced, Jake proposed to me on a Saturday morning at the same coffee shop where we had met. It was not elaborate or Instagram-worthy. He simply got down on one knee next to our usual table, pulled out a modest but beautiful ring, and asked me to be his wife with tears in his eyes. The ring was a simple solitaire diamond on a white gold band. It was not huge. It was not from a famous jewelry store, but it was chosen with love and care, and it fit my hand perfectly. When I said yes, the entire coffee shop erupted in applause, and I knew without a doubt that this was the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. That evening, I called my parents to share the news. I was so excited, so happy that I honestly expected them to be thrilled for me. I had found someone who loved me unconditionally, someone who made me laugh and supported my dreams and wanted to build a life together. The video call connected, and I saw my parents sitting on their familiar living room couch, with Madison visible in the background, scrolling through her phone. I held up my left hand with the biggest smile I had ever worn and announced, "I am engaged." The silence that followed was not what I had expected. My mom blinked a few times, and my dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Finally, my mom spoke up. "Engaged, Chloe. Honey, this is very sudden. Have you talked this through with the family?" I was confused by the question. "What do you mean? Talked it through, Jake, and I love each other and we want to get married. Is not that what matters?" My dad cleared his throat and leaned toward the camera. "Sweetheart, you know in our family tradition, the oldest daughter should get married first. Madison is not even seriously dating anyone right now. How do you think this looks?" I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was hearing. Madison looked up from her phone with what appeared to be genuine surprise. Though looking back, I wonder if she had been listening all along. "What tradition?" I asked. "Since when is there a rule about who gets married in what order?" My mom's expression had shifted from surprise to something that looked almost like disappointment. "Chloe Madison is going to feel terrible about this. She is your younger sister, and now she is going to look like an old maid if you get married first." Madison was 26 years old, hardly an old maid by anyone's standards, but apparently that logic did not apply in my family's world. The conversation went downhill from there. What I had thought would be one of the happiest phone calls of my life turned into a 2-hour argument that left me feeling like I had somehow committed a crime by falling in love and accepting a marriage proposal. My mom kept returning to the supposed family tradition that I had never heard mentioned before. She talked about how her mother had always taught her that the older daughter should set the example for the younger ones, and that included getting married in the proper order. It felt like she was making it up as she went along, creating rules that would ensure Madison's feelings were protected above everything else. My dad joined in, talking about the family's reputation in the community and how people would talk if the younger daughter got married first. He kept using phrases like, "It just does not look right," and "people will ask questions," as if my engagement was somehow a reflection of Madison's desirability rather than a celebration of my own happiness. The more they talked, the more I realized this had nothing to do with tradition and everything to do with maintaining Madison as the golden child, the one who got everything first and best. Even my engagement was being viewed through the lens of how it would affect Madison's image. Madison herself stayed mostly quiet during the initial conversation, but I could see her expression in the background. She looked troubled, but not in the way someone looks when they are happy for their sister. She looked troubled in the way someone looks when their carefully constructed world order has been disrupted. 3 days later, Madison called me directly. Her voice was sweet and supportive the way it had always been when she wanted something from me. "Chloe, sweetie, I want you to know that I am so happy for you," she began, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Jake seems like a really nice guy, and I know you two will be very happy together." I felt a wave of relief. Maybe I had misunderstood the family's reaction. Maybe Madison was going to be the supportive sister I had always hoped for. "But," she continued, and my heart sank, because there is always a "but." "I think I understand why mom and dad are so upset. I mean, I get it. You are in love and you want to get married but could not. You wait just a little bit, just until I get my situation figured out." "What situation?" I asked, though I had a feeling I already knew where this was going. Madison explained that Samuel Richardson, the corporate lawyer she had been dating on and off for the past year, was planning to propose to her soon. Very soon, actually. He had apparently been ring shopping and had made reservations at some exclusive restaurant in Paris for the following month. "He is going to propose during our European vacation," she said with excitement that felt forced. "It is going to be so romantic, and I know I am going to say yes. But Chloe, if you get married first, it is going to overshadow everything. People are going to be like, 'Oh, Madison is finally getting married too,' instead of being excited for me." She painted a picture of how quick and simple her wedding would be. Just a small ceremony, very elegant, nothing too elaborate. She would plan it fast so that I could have my dream wedding just a few months later. All I had to do was wait. "Just 3 or 4 months," she pleaded. "That is all I am asking. Is not that worth it to keep the family together?" For a moment, I actually considered it. Madison had always been persuasive, and the idea of keeping peace in the family was appealing. Maybe it would not hurt to wait a little longer. Jake and I were not in any rush, and if it made everyone happy. But when I brought up the idea with Jake that evening, his reaction was immediate and firm. "Absolutely not," he said, setting down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. "Chloe, you are 28 years old. You have been letting your family control your choices your entire life. When is enough going to be enough?" He reminded me of stories I had told him about my childhood, about always coming second to Madison's needs and wants. He pointed out that this was just another version of the same pattern, where my happiness was expected to be secondary to maintaining Madison's position as the favored daughter. "What happens in 4 months when Madison decides she wants to wait longer for some other reason?" he asked. "What happens when she wants the spring wedding season all to herself, or when she decides she needs more time to plan the perfect ceremony? Where does it end?" Jake told me about his own family dynamics. His older brother had always been the athletic star, the one who got full rides to college and professional opportunities handed to him. For years, Jake had made himself smaller to avoid outshining his brother, until he realized he was sabotaging his own life to maintain someone else's ego. "The people who really love you want you to be happy," he said, taking my hands in his. "They do not ask you to delay your happiness for their convenience." His words hit me hard because they were true. I had spent my entire life making myself smaller, quieter, less significant, so that Madison could shine brighter. Even now, on what should have been the happiest day of my life, I was being asked to step aside once again. I called my parents back the next evening to let them know that Jake and I were keeping our original wedding date. We had already put down deposits, sent save-the-date cards to his family, and booked the venue for 6 months out. We were not going to change our plans to accommodate a hypothetical engagement that might or might not happen. The reaction was swift and harsh. My father's voice was ice cold when he answered the phone. "Chloe, if you are determined to be this selfish, then your mother and I need to seriously reconsider our involvement in this wedding," he said. My mom picked up the extension, and I could hear that she had been crying. "I just do not understand how you can be so inconsiderate of your sister's feelings," she said. "Madison is devastated. She feels like you are deliberately trying to upstage her." Frozen. In the background, I could hear Madison's voice, though she was not on the phone directly. "She has always been jealous of me," she was saying to someone, probably my dad. "Now she is trying to ruin my happiness just to get attention." The conversation escalated quickly. My parents accused me of being jealous, selfish, and inconsiderate. They said I had always been resentful of Madison's success, and that this was my way of finally getting back at her. They brought up every small slight from our childhood, every moment when I had not been sufficiently supportive of Madison's achievements. If you go through with this wedding against the family's wishes, my father said finally, then you are choosing that boy over your own family. And if that is the choice you are making, then maybe you should not expect your family to be there to watch you make it. The line went dead and I sat staring at the phone in my hand, unable to believe what had just happened. In the space of one phone call, my engagement had gone from a celebration to an ultimatum. Jake found me sitting on our couch an hour later, still holding the phone and crying. When I told him what had happened, he did not say, "I told you so," even though he could have. Instead, he sat down next to me, pulled me into his arms, and said the words I needed to hear. "Their loss," he said simply. "If they cannot see how incredible you are, if they cannot be happy that their daughter found someone who loves her completely, then that says everything about them and nothing about you." The morning of our wedding arrived, with October sunshine streaming through the windows of the small bridal suite at our venue. I had barely slept the night before, checking my phone every few minutes for a text or missed call from my family. Some tiny desperate part of me still believed they would come to their senses and show up for their daughter's wedding day. My maid of honor, Sarah, had been my college roommate and closest friend for nearly 8 years. She had watched my family dynamics from the outside and had never been shy about pointing out how unfairly I was treated. That morning, she was trying to keep my spirits up while helping me into my dress, but I could see the anger in her eyes every time I mentioned hoping my parents would change their minds. "Honey, you look absolutely stunning," she said, fastening the tiny buttons on the back of my gown. "And you know what today is about you and Jake and the life you are building together. Anyone who cannot see how beautiful and special that is does not deserve to be here." The dress was simple but elegant, with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt that made me feel like myself, but better. Jake and I had chosen everything for this wedding together, from the small mountain venue with its rustic wooden chapel to the wildflower centerpieces that reflected our love of hiking together. It was intimate, personal, and exactly what we wanted. 1 hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I called my mom's cell phone one last time. I had prepared a short speech about how much it would mean to me if they came, how they could put aside their disappointment for just one day to celebrate with their daughter. But the call went straight to voicemail, and I knew they had turned their phone off deliberately. Sarah squeezed my hand and said, "Their choice, not yours. Remember that." When it was time to walk down the aisle, I did it alone. Jake and I had decided that since my father was not going to be there to give me away, I would walk down the aisle independently, symbolizing that I was choosing this marriage for myself. But as I walked past the rows of guests, all I could see were the 3 empty chairs in the front row where my family should have been sitting. Jake's parents, David and Susan, had flown in from Michigan and had immediately treated me like the daughter they had never had. Susan had helped me pick out my dress, and David had insisted on paying for the flowers because every bride deserves beautiful flowers on her wedding day. They had tears in their eyes as I walked toward their son, and I could see them looking at those empty chairs with expressions of bewilderment and sadness. The ceremony itself was everything I had dreamed of. Jake's vows made everyone cry, including him. He talked about how I had taught him that love did not have to be complicated or conditional, that the best love was the kind that made you feel completely accepted for who you already were. When I promised to love him through all of life's challenges, I meant every word, especially after the challenges we had already faced just getting to this moment. During the reception, I must have answered the question, "Where is your family?" at least 20 times. I had prepared a polite response about them having prior commitments, but each time I said it, I felt the sting of embarrassment and rejection. Jake's family and friends were warm and welcoming, but I could see the confusion in their eyes when they realized my entire side of the family was absent from my own wedding. Jake's best man, his brother Ryan, made a toast that included the line to Chloe, who is not just gaining a husband today, but a whole family who already loves her like she has always been one of us. The applause was thunderous, and I felt a warmth that partially filled the cold space left by my family's absence. The most painful moment came during the parent dances. Jake danced with his mother to their special song, and then David asked me to dance, saying, "I would be honored to stand in for your father tonight if you would let me." We danced to "What a Wonderful World," and he whispered to me, "Jake is lucky to have you, and so are we." 3 months after our wedding, I received an elaborate invitation in the mail. Madison and Samuel were getting married at the Riverside Country Club with a guest list of 300 people, a full orchestra, and what appeared to be an unlimited budget. The invitation was addressed to Ms. Chloe Peterson, using my maiden name as if my marriage had not happened or did not count. There was no note included, no explanation of why I had not been told about the engagement or included in any of the planning. According to the invitation, Madison was having 6 bridesmaids, all sorority sisters and high school friends. I was not among them. Jake found me sitting at our kitchen table, staring at the gold-embossed cardstock. "Are you going to go?" he asked gently. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to go to show them that I was doing fine, that I had built a beautiful life without their approval. But a bigger part of me knew that attending would just be subjecting myself to more of the same treatment, more subtle reminders that I was not really part of the family anymore. "No," I said finally. "I think that chapter of my life is closed now." A week later, I saw photos from Madison's wedding posted on social media by distant relatives. She looked stunning in a designer gown that probably cost more than Jake and I had spent on our entire wedding. The country club was decorated like something out of a fairy tale, with crystal chandeliers and thousands of white roses. My parents looked proud and happy in every photo, my father beaming as he walked Madison down the aisle, my mother crying tears of joy during the ceremony. Seeing those photos should have hurt more than they did. Instead, I felt something like relief. They had the wedding they wanted, the perfect family image they had always cultivated. And I had something they could not understand or appreciate, a marriage built on genuine love and mutual respect rather than social expectations and family obligations. Jake and I spent that same weekend hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, something we did almost every weekend when the weather was good. We talked about our future, about the design business I wanted to start, about the house we wanted to build together someday. We were broke by most standards, still paying off student loans and living in a small apartment, but we were genuinely happy in a way I had never experienced before. Over the following months, I threw myself into building my career. The design studio where I worked was small but growing, and my boss began giving me larger, more important projects. I discovered I had a talent for branding and visual identity work, helping small business owners articulate their vision through design. It was meaningful work that felt completely different from the corporate track Madison had chosen. Jake got promoted to senior engineer at his software company, and we started talking seriously about starting our own business together. He would handle the technical side of web development, and I would manage the design and branding aspects. We spent evenings working on our business plan and weekends networking at local entrepreneur meetups. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that belonged entirely to me, something my family could not take away or diminish. The absence of their approval, which had once felt devastating, began to feel like freedom. 2 years and 3 months after Madison's fairy tale wedding, I was working late at my now independent design studio when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, the first time she had called me since before my wedding. My hands actually shook as I debated whether to answer. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Chloe, honey, it is Mom." Her voice sounded older, more tired than I remembered. "I was wondering if we could talk." The conversation that followed was unlike anything I had experienced with my mother before. She sounded genuinely remorseful as she explained what had happened to the perfect family image they had worked so hard to maintain. Samuel Richardson, Madison's lawyer husband with the trust fund and the expensive taste, had been arrested 6 weeks earlier for tax fraud and money laundering. The FBI had raided their house, frozen their assets, and charged him with multiple federal crimes. The scandal had made the front page of the local newspaper, complete with photos of Samuel being led away in handcuffs and Madison crying in the background. "The whole thing has been a nightmare," my mother said. "Madison had to file for divorce immediately to protect herself legally. She lost everything, Chloe. The house, the cars, even her jewelry. Samuel had been using her accounts for his illegal activities without her knowledge. Madison had moved back into my childhood bedroom, the same room that had been redecorated into Madison's teenage paradise, while I was away at college. She was seeing a therapist for depression and anxiety, struggling to rebuild her life from scratch at 28 years old. "Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking," my mom continued. "We realized we made some terrible mistakes. We were so focused on what we thought success looked like that we forgot what really matters." She apologized for missing my wedding, for prioritizing appearances over their daughter's happiness, for treating me like I was somehow less worthy of love and support than Madison. She asked if there was any way we could rebuild our relationship, if I would be willing to meet with them to start over. I listened to everything she said, and I felt something I had not expected: peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but not anger either. Just a calm acceptance of what had happened and a clear understanding of who I had become despite their choices. I appreciate you calling, I told her honestly, and I am sorry about what Madison is going through. No one deserves that kind of betrayal. Could we see you? My mom asked hopefully. Maybe take you and Jake out to dinner. We would really like to meet him properly. I agreed to meet them, but on my terms and in a neutral location. Jake and I drove to Ohio 3 weeks later, and we met my parents and Madison at a restaurant downtown. I barely recognized them when they walked in. My father, who had always been so proud and confident, looked smaller somehow. My mother seemed nervous, fidgeting with her purse and looking around the restaurant like she was not sure she belonged there. Madison looked the most different of all. Gone was the polished, put-together woman who had always seemed to float through life effortlessly. She was thinner, paler, and there was something in her eyes that spoke of real pain and genuine humility. They apologized again more formally this time. My father admitted that he had been wrong to prioritize tradition over his daughter's happiness. My mother said she regretted missing the most important day of my life and asked if I could ever forgive them. Madison spoke last, and her words surprised me the most. "Chloe, I owe you a huge apology," she said, tears gathering in her eyes. "I was jealous of you, not the other way around. You always knew who you were and what you wanted. I spent my whole life trying to be what everyone expected me to be, and I never learned how to just be myself." It's true. She talked about how my independence had always intimidated her, how she had manipulated situations to maintain her position as the favored child, because she was afraid of what would happen if she was not special anymore. "Watching you build a life on your own terms, seeing how happy you are with Jake, I realized you were the brave one all along," she said. "I am sorry it took losing everything for me to understand that." We talked for 3 hours that night. I told them about my design business, which was now successful enough to support both Jake and me. I shared stories about our life in Denver, our weekend hikes, our plans to buy a house with mountain views. I talked about Jake's family, who had become my family, and how I had learned what unconditional love actually looked like. My parents listened without trying to redirect the conversation to Madison or offering unwanted advice about my choices. For the first time in my life, they seemed genuinely interested in my happiness for its own sake, not as it related to their image or expectations. By the end of the evening, we had established some ground rules for moving forward. We could have a relationship, but it would be built on mutual respect rather than family obligation. I would not pretend the past had not happened, and they could not expect me to prioritize their comfort over my own well-being. Most importantly, I made it clear that Jake was my family now, that the life we had built together was my priority, and that any relationship with them would have to respect and honor that reality. As we said goodbye in the restaurant parking lot, my mother hugged me tightly and whispered, "I am so proud of the woman you have become. I should have told you that a long time ago." Driving home to Denver the next day, Jake and I talked about the visit and what it meant for our future. I realized that I no longer needed their approval or validation to feel complete. Their absence from my wedding had been painful, but it had also taught me something valuable about standing up for myself and choosing love over fear. "How do you feel about all of this?" Jake asked as we crossed the Colorado state line, the mountains coming into view ahead of us. "Grateful," I said, surprising myself with the honesty of that answer. Not for what they did, but for what it taught me. I learned that family is not just about who shares your DNA, it is about who shows up for you, who celebrates your happiness, who loves you without conditions. Jake reached over and squeezed my hand. "So, what happens now?" I looked at the mountains ahead of us, thinking about our little house with the workshop Jake was building in the garage, about the clients who trusted me to help them share their stories through design, about the life we had created together through love and hard work and mutual support. "Now we keep building," I said. "We keep choosing love over fear, authenticity over approval, and each other over everything else." 6 months later, Madison visited us in Denver. She was working as a teacher, now rebuilding her life slowly but genuinely. She seemed different, more real than she had ever been when she was trying to be perfect. We went hiking together, and she told me she was finally learning to like herself without needing to be better than anyone else. My parents and I talk regularly now, but our relationship has healthy boundaries. They are proud of my business success, and they have grown to appreciate Jake for the kind, supportive man he is. But I no longer look to them for validation, and they no longer expect me to make my choices based on their comfort. Sometimes people ask me if I regret standing up to my family, if I wish I had just waited and avoided all the drama. The answer is always no. That wedding day taught me that happiness is not something you wait for permission to have. It is something you choose, something you fight for, something you build one decision at a time. Jake and I celebrated our third wedding anniversary last month with a weekend trip to the same mountains where he proposed. We are working on buying our first house, planning for the family we want to start, and building a business that reflects our values and dreams. Sometimes the greatest love stories are not about finding the perfect person, but about finding the courage to choose love over fear, authenticity over approval, and your own happiness over everyone else's expectations. And my story, well, it is just beginning. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own happiness? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please give this video a like if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real stories about life's toughest decisions, and share this with someone who might need to hear that their happiness matters too. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is love yourself enough to set healthy boundaries. I wish you all the courage to choose your own happiness and the wisdom to know that you deserve to be loved exactly as you are.